Okay, so welcome today to the session on the 5+1 steps of forgiveness. Okay, so to forgive, there are 5 steps which are mandatory in the eyes of the Lord, as we have seen. And then there is the +1, which is the optional one. And optional in the sense that it takes 2 people from both sides, and that is the one of reconciliation. Okay, so let's start looking at how do we forgive. Now, the first step is the spoken decision that you will forgive. Now, as I already mentioned in the last session, you may have to make the decision. That is where King David speaks about in the Psalms, do not let the sun go down over your anger. Go into your inner room, keep your mouth shut, go into your inner room and meditate. In that process, what you do is you choose to forgive. Now, at the moment that you do this, that is most times in your emotions, not one single emotion to be found that wants to forgive. Okay, this is a decision with your will. Now,
okay.
yeah. So now, when you make this decision, then and you know that it is a big issue that you have to forgive, maybe something that went on very long, of something very severe that had a very deep impact, then please always make sure that you go to somebody to get help in the process of forgiveness, and somebody who understands the process of forgiveness. Okay? Because especially with very deep things, and also when something has been very long ago that it happened, but you never knew how to deal with it. Especially with abuses that happened in childhood with people. As a child, they grew up not knowing what to do, how to handle it, and parents and people around didn't know, then a child will just push it away. And the problem is that the abuse that happens creates or becomes an open door for lies. So the child will start believing all kinds of lies about himself, about others, and those lies can go very far. And the problem is that in growing up, the child will start building on top of those lies. And normally what lies do in our lives, they create new lies. Because they create new hurts, they create new lies. And so by the time somebody has come beyond teenage years, it has become a whole bulwark of lies and hurts and things built on top of one another. So the moment you want to start touching that issue, that is like, a whole sucker way is pulled open. With all nasty stuff inside that has all been tangled into one another. And the one issue has connected with multiple issues after that. And so then it's very important to have somebody to help you through it, to help you keep focused on the one issue and help you to record the other things to start forgiving again. And, it can become an extensive process. But that's also the healing process. Okay? But if you would try to do it alone, you might get stuck and give up. So first we start with the spoken decision. And now we get next to the very point, why is abuse hurting? Because you see, every abuse hurts because you lose something. And what is actually hurting is what you lose. Now, if I leave my wallet on the table and I have friends over at my house, and afterwards my money is gone from my wallet, what have I lost?
You've lost your money.
Yes, well, that's most times not that much. That's maybe, well, in Naira, maybe it is 2,000 Naira, 3,000 Naira highest. Is that all I have lost?
You've lost trust also.
I've lost trust. And it's in my own house. So I've lost my sense of safety in my house. You know, normally your own house is where you feel most safe. But when something is taken from you in your house, your sense of safety is lost. And what do you think about friendship?
Yeah, friendship too.
Yes, you thought you were
It's
better
unshaky.
friends. Yes. Now, all those things are much more valuable than the money that you lost. Do you understand? So in our lives, the things we lose, among the things we lose, most times the non-material things are much more painful than the material
Yeah,
things, because
yeah,
those are far much harder to get back.
yeah,
Okay?
yeah.
You see, for example, if somebody would steal my phone, now, of course, the phone has a certain value. Okay? And when I'm in the Netherlands, I can much easier get another phone again than here. If I'm here, yeah, I have to either buy a new one, or it's not, or it's still very costly to buy a used one, and it will not be as good as the one I buy in the Netherlands. So that will be frustrating, but I can replace the phone. But you see, everything that's in my phone, I will not get back. That's much more valuable and much more stressful. And so it's often the non-material things that are so painful, and that sometimes we have a hard time to even recognize. Now, the one who has been teaching this to me was Dr. Archibald Hart. He was, you know, maybe you remember the Twin Towers when they were, when they came down, when the airplanes flew in it in 9/11.
Yeah.
Now, that man was the counselor of the counselors. So the counselors that were counseling the people, he counseled the counselors. And this man, he shared with us, to give an example. He said when he always had been driving old cars, used cars. And at one point when he had become a professor, he finally got the money to buy a brand new car. And so he was very proud, you know, having a brand new car for the first time in his life. And within the first week, somebody bumped just into his car, into the front fender. Now, of course, that person had a car insurance, and since that person was wrong, you know, he could take his car to the mechanic, and they replaced that fender with a new one, the same color. And when he got his car back, he expected to be as happy again as before. And he was still grieving it. He still was not as happy anymore with his car. And he didn't get that same joy back. And it troubled him. He was like, man, my car is fixed. There's nothing, nobody ever will see that it had the bump.
But the memory.
Yeah, well, he asked his students. And he said, and because he couldn't figure it out himself, why am I still feeling depressed about my car and not happy anymore? And then one of the students said, sir, it will always remain a repaired car. It's never going to be brand new again. It's that memory of that bump that was in there. It wasn't spotless anymore. Even though the bump wasn't visible anymore. It's that memory, that fact that, hey, that you know, there was a particular joy that it was his achievement for the first time in his life to have a brand new car without any repairs, without any flaws. And it had just become a repaired car. You see, that's why I will never buy a new car. But you understand, for him, that was I mean, I don't have the money for a new car either, but that doesn't matter. I can move around with the used one. But you see, it is sometimes these little things that is very hard to get a grip of it. Like, where is this emotion coming from? Why am I feeling this feeling? Okay. Now, in order to forgive and release the person fully from your heart, you need to know what you have lost. Now, what do you think somebody who has been sexually abused, because that's where I work a lot with people who have been sexually abused in childhood, is main part of my ministry. What do you think they have lost? What does a child lose that gets abused?
I think lost dignity.
Yes, dignity.
Feel they lost dignity. Feel they lost I think pride, as in like this normal, the good pride. Let me use that word. The this
Self-worth.
normal self worth. Yeah, yeah, that's the word. Self
Self-worth, yes.
worth. Yeah, dignity, self worth. I guess.
What do you think of childhood? Is that child still a child? Innocent?
No, no,
No.
no.
The child has lost his whole childhood instantly, has lost innocence. A child is
Yeah,
not,
innocent.
in our development, we are not to know about certain things till a certain age to
Yeah.
healthy development. So that child has also lost the ability to develop in a healthy, God-given way. That child has lost his boundaries because the boundaries are violated. So he's lost the capacity of upholding boundaries. Yeah. So there are so many things a child loses. Self-worth, self-respect, sense of ownership over his body or her body, the sense of the power to set boundaries. There is so incredibly many things a child loses at that moment. If you make a list, it's undescribable so much. It's so devastating. Because it's basically the deepest violation that can happen in anyone's life. And unfortunately, that's an incredibly increasing issue worldwide at this moment. It's really bad. Many lose their health. And of course, then especially with the case that most times children don't even get proper help to overcome it, or people don't even find out easily, because most times it happens to children who are not properly protected. Children will start acting later on themselves on that unhealthy behavior, and they will lose their health, they lose everything. Yeah. And some things you can never get back. They're just not replaceable. Now comes one of the most important things. Why it is so important to start this process even immediately. Because the third point, the third step, is allow yourself to feel the pain. Because that is the pain that is caused to you, that you have to let go, that you have to find healing of. The pain is what makes you sick, emotionally sick, spiritually sick, and ultimately sick in your body. So now, if I start the process of forgiveness immediately, do I have difficulty to let myself feel the pain?
No.
No, the pain is fully there, to the full extent, without anything reduced. So this step is a natural given if you start this process immediately. But if you were hurt 10 years ago, 20 years ago, and you have never been dealing with it, and it has destroyed your life, it has put his ugly head everywhere, and you now want to start forgiving the person who hurted you long ago, you probably have pushed away that pain very deep. And that pain has become mixed with many other pains and hurts. And so it's a very messy, confusing thing. You have start basing lots of your belief system on what happened, which causes pain again, which you cannot just let go of by forgiving the person, because to get free from that secondary hurt, you have to discover the lies that you have started believing, repent of those lies, and replace them with the truth. That's a whole different process in itself again. And so which pain is because you have to forgive someone? Which pain is based on the lies that you have come to believe? Which pains are based on your own behavior based on those lies? You understand? It is all layers of pain tangled together. And it becomes very
Yeah.
hard to untangle that and unravel it. And that's why you need help. Okay? For somebody who understands what is going on. And it's these kind of complex things of things built on top of one another that even leads people to attempt suicide,
Mm.
because in the end of their life they feel like their whole life has zero value anyways. There is no reason to live. It's one big mess. There is only pain. There's panic attacks,
Mm.
and in the end they give up. So then it's not only forgiving anymore what you need to do. You have to start unraveling lots of things, and in many different levels resolve it. So when you do the forgiveness process, you start it immediately, it's a much more easy process.
Yeah.
And the Lord desires us to be free of bitterness and pain. Now, the fourth step is a very important one, because now that you feel the pain, you know what you have lost, so you know the issue at hand, okay? Now you know after
Yeah.
step 3, you know exactly where you are dealing with. And then it says for step 4, bring it all to God, and He will help you to let go of the things you lost and heal your pain. Now, at this point is where the second process enters into the forgiveness process. And the second process is the grief process. Because what is very normal when you look, like for example, I don't know, are your parents still alive?
Yes.
Okay, that's a blessing. Well, mine are also still alive. Your grandparents, have you known them?
I knew my grandmas. I never knew my
Is
grandpas.
okay, but your grandma, you know, is she still alive?
Yeah. No. They are both. I have no grandparents anymore.
Okay, so when she was still alive, were you close with her?
To some extent.
Okay, so when she passed away, how did that feel?
Well, I don't know. I it
Or
wasn't it wasn't really
you were not that
it
close?
wasn't really it wasn't really hitting because I guess at the later part or later part towards the some years to the end of our years we weren't really that anymore
Have
because I don't know. Yeah.
have you ever had anyone else who was close to you pass away?
Um, Not exactly. I guess the closest, the one that I would say is closest to that kind of a thing was, there was there was this girl that was in the church in my church then.
Mhm.
She was kind of new, so we're just beginning to get close. Actually, we were just beginning to just knowing each other, then getting close like that. That's when she passed on. So I guess that's the closest.
Yeah,
And yeah, I I guess
yeah,
that's the closest.
yes. But then it hurts. You feel pain.
Yeah, it kind of hurts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And in that situation, it's normal to everyone that you have to grieve it. Okay? It's normal
Right.
that you cry about it. The more precious, the more close somebody is that will pass away. You know, you are expected to take time to grieve. Now, that same grief, you need to grieve for every single thing that you lose. Now, there are things that you maybe grieve 1 minute about, just tiny things. It happens all the time. And then you let go. It's replaceable, it's not that important. You know, you let go. You know, even if you maybe would have liked to go somewhere, you had planned to go somewhere on a day, and then some circumstances change and you can't go. No, you're not happy. But, you know, that doesn't trouble you anymore a week later. Okay, the grief is brief, is short, let go. So that's
Yeah.
something we have to do all our life. And we most times do it unconsciously. But when we, in certain issues, have issues in our life that we have not done that, every time something happens that connects to that, that reminds you of it, you don't grieve it anymore. It starts piling up, piling up, piling up, and it becomes a very big issue. Okay? And so, what you have to start doing in this, when you start intentionally forgiving people, is when you come to this point, you have to intentionally start grieving. If you don't do that, you can never let go. So, now how do we grieve? There are two images I will show you that both uh, represent very important parts of grieving. Okay?
Mm.
So, in this first one, you see that you are living life, and at a certain point comes a loss.
Mm.
Okay. Now, with every with every issue, but especially recognizable when it is a severe issue, there is always initially denial. You know, there is disbelief, there is a shock. It's like you can't believe this happens. Now, this
Mm.
issue of shock is very important to realize. Um, when you touch with your hand by mistake on a hot stove, what do you do?
Yeah. You check your hand away.
You pull
You
away.
check your hands off. Yeah.
Is it because you intentionally feel the pain and say, "Oh, this is hot, this is hurting, let me pull away"?
No.
Or you touch and you pull away, and you're not even aware why you pull away.
Yeah. For sure.
Most Then you look at your fingers and you see that it is burnt. Do you feel the pain immediately?
There's sometimes no.
Uh-huh. Because the signal from your fingers goes to your brain, and your brain identifies the pain and says this is far too much to feel at this moment. So your brain will keep quiet for you so that you will not panic. I had it one time. I was cutting branches from a tree. I wanted to cut down the tree, and I had a brand new saw, but it was a very bad quality saw. It was very, very sharp, but in the same time, it was very wobbly.
Mm.
So it jumped off the branch on my hand and
Mm.
created immediately a very deep cut.
Mm.
So I looked at it and I was like, oh man, this is not good at all. This is not good. It was here on my hand palm. And I was like, this is not good. This is far too deep. This is. But I didn't feel anything, zero pain. So I went to my father. I said, this doesn't look good. Can we? I think we have to go to rush to the hospital to get this stitched because this is not good. So my father looked at it and he said, yes, we have to go to the hospital. Now, you need to realize from my hometown to the closest hospital is 10 kilometers.
Ooh.
Now, we jumped in the car. My father drove to the hospital. When we reached the other city where the hospital is, that is when I started feeling the first pain. By the time we entered the hospital, I was about to faint. So they still told me, yeah, just wait, the doctor is coming soon to you. I said, I cannot stand any longer because otherwise I'm here on the floor for in the next 10 seconds. I have to lay down now. And the full force of the pain came. And they quickly put pain injection for the pain killing so that I wouldn't faint. But that was probably about even half an hour. Between that it happened and I felt the full pain. Now that is shock. Now when your body goes in shock because of a physical trauma, the bigger the trauma to your body, the longer it takes for you to feel the pain. But the pain will automatically come. I mean, there is no way you stop that pain from ever coming. Your body will hold back the pain, your brain will hold back the signal to your consciousness about the level of the pain for a certain extent of time. And then your brain will start telling you how much the pain is and let the full force of the pain come. Now, the problem with emotional shock, which is happening here, is that emotional shock does not automatically stop. Especially not in more severe cases. In particularly, it has happened that I was helping someone and we were in prayer and he was struggling with certain issues and suddenly he started remembering that somebody sexually abused him. That memory he never had anywhere in his life. Yeah. But all the problems he was facing in his life could be very logically explained by sexual abuse. But when that abuse happened when he was a small child, his brain had gone into shock and the memory was completely gone. And your brain will only allow the memory to come back when there is a very safe time, a very safe place in your life that and also that the Lord knows that now you can handle it, now you can deal with it. And only then the memory can come back. And so for him, that memory came back in our time of prayer. And that is when he could start dealing with it. Okay, and it helped him to understand why he had been struggling. And then he had the memory back. He knew what happened. But that memory had been locked up for probably 20 years. Okay, and he was wondering why he was deeply depressed. So when in someone's life here a severe shock takes place, when it's a very severe abuse that goes on, especially in childhood, you see, a child has 36 hours to start speaking about what happened before this shock takes place most times. So when something bad happens, the child will know. And when the child, for example, has safe parents, parents who listen to the child. That's why it's so important for parents to listen. Not just listen once a week, listen every day. What's going on with your child? When they come home, listen to them. What has been going on? When the child shares, the memory will not go into shock. Okay? The memory goes most times into shock after around 36 hours. When the child has not been able to speak about it. And then the brain says, okay, this is going to be too much chaos, this is going to be too much stress, and it shuts down. And then the memory will be gone till whenever later on in life, most times after lots of bad consequences, that person hopefully gets to a safe place often with the help of a counselor, that the memory will come back. Now, of course, after the initial denial, the disbelief, or even the shock, there is a lot of anger. And anger can be directed at God, at the other person, at others, or at yourself. And then you get the stage of guilt and resentment and remorse. You know, you get self-pity. Why is this happening with me? Why always me? You know, self-anger. If I had not had been so stupid, I shouldn't have gone. If I had stayed at home, you know, if I had taken another route, if I, you know, you start become angry with yourself, start putting blame on yourself. There is often grief. There is helplessness, and this is when it gets more severe, when you get really to the bottom of helplessness, hopelessness, and in the end, depression and despair. Now, normally you go through all these stages to come to the bottom where you are ready to let go and give up. The problem is that often in this part, we can go in circles. You know, you see it here. You know, before you have that point, quit fighting, the arrows go in circles. You know, it says repetition.
Yeah.
So you start turning around and repeating that process, repeating it, and you can repeat it for years. And it just becomes like when you have a hurricane, you know, it sucks up everything. It makes chaos everywhere. That is how this becomes. It starts sucking up other issues, other problems, and it creates chaos around you and in your life everywhere. And this is where other people start becoming angry with you at a certain point and say, why is he not letting go? Why is he doing this? What is wrong with him? No, people don't understand you anymore. You become more frustrated, more angry. No, it becomes only intensified. The point with loss and the process of grieving is that every one of us has to come to the point of quitting to fight. Because the reality is, what you have lost most probably will not come back.
Never come back. Yeah.
If it is replaceable things, well, for sure you have already moved on. But if it is irreplaceable things, that can also be when you lose your job, you know, or maybe you hear from the doctor that you are sick and there is no medical hope for you to be cured. Of course, you trust the Lord, but you will get into these cycles and these stresses. And it's very important to come at the point of surrendering. Now, even to trust the Lord for healing, you have to still surrender to Him. Now, when it is an issue with health. And out of the surrender comes strength. Because now it's no longer you who is fighting. You're ready to let go and allow the Lord to come in.
Yeah.
The aim of all the former parts was to force and demand to get back to the old situation of before the abuse happened, of before the loss happened. Okay? Yeah. The issue is the moment a loss happens, it never will go back to the old way it used to be before. It never will. And that's why you have to let go. And the moment you let go, that is when you can start getting faith. That is when you can start getting hope for something new, because you have accepted that the old one is not coming back. So now there is a space, a void that you can start filling again in a new way, not in the old way. Now you can start admitting, you know, what it did to you. And you can start remembering, which can help you both to cry and to laugh. You know, you can remember the good parts and be happy what you had, because you have let go of the anger that it is no more there. And you can cry of the pain of the loss, but that is the process of, in a deeper level, letting go. And you can start talking about it with others. Before that, you don't want to talk about it. Before you quit fighting, you don't want to talk. You only want to fight. But now you can start sharing and talking about it with others. Now you can accept and say goodbye. And you get back your serenity, your peace of mind. And that opens the door to start planning and get into new actions. Now, the amazing thing is when you go well through this process, actually, the new life that you will build up will be stronger than the former one.
Mm.
Okay? But the problem is that before that point of quit fighting, we cannot see that. Then we still have in our mind, it was perfect. It can never get this good anymore. It can never get better. You cannot see that. As
Mm.
long as you're fighting, it's impossible to see that. Okay?
Yeah.
Now, to come to that point of before you quit fighting, that you have to go through those emotions. You have to go through those stages. Okay?
Mm.
But there is no need to repeat it endlessly. Okay? Then we are just hurting ourselves. Now, to look at with a different picture to the same thing, this one shows a little bit more nicely all the different grouped stages. Okay? So you see again the shock and the denial in the beginning when something happens. Okay? There is the confusion and the fear, and you feel numb and you blame. And then it starts emotionally feeling you are going down. It looks like it's becoming worse. You know, you become angry, frustrated. It
Mm.
can be anxiety, even panic attacks. You know, you feel embarrassed, you feel ashamed. And then when you get to the bottom, you feel the depression and the detachment. You feel you're torn away, ripped away from what you lost. But you have to, because you have to let go. But that's when you feel completely overwhelmed. You have no energy, you feel helpless. Okay, and then the point comes where you start talking about it, is where you stop fighting. And you can start dialogue, you can start talking about it, sometimes bargaining to see if you can still get parts of it back, which would then you will hopefully find out that you won't, because most times the Lord has something new. You know, you need to always realize also, if the Lord allowed it to happen, even if it was in your own foolishness, um, if the Lord allows something to happen, it's most times only because he has something better for you,
Mm.
something more glorious. But it's only in this process that you can start seeing that. Okay, so you get the desire to share with others. You struggle to find meaning. And then you come to the point of accepting, and you start looking at new options, new possibilities, make new plans for your life. And in the end, you realize that actually you do have the strength, with the help of others and with the help of the Lord, but you have found the strength to overcome, and it will make you stronger and more empowered. You most times will set up any next project or any next phase of your life in a better way, because you will secure yourself better in a more healthy way. You will not, uh, like for example, I shared with you last time that about the person who so much destroyed our ministry, that even converts out of Islam went back to Islam. Now,
Mm.
later on in my life, I did get a similar kind of person doing similar kind of things again. But you see, I had learned my lesson from the first time. So when later on another person came and started doing those same kind of things, the moment I recognized it, I put my foot on the brake. I said, wait a minute, I'm not going to accept this. And I set up my boundaries very clear. And that made that person ultimately to leave, where that woman had, in that case it was then a woman, had really planned already in everything to completely push me out of the ministry, push even the other person out of the ministry, and just take over everything as if it was hers. Okay, so you will build up a stronger security, so you will actually get out of it more stronger. Okay, more secure, and you will have more meaning in life. You know, it's very nice. There's a very nice man. He's very elderly now in the Netherlands. He always said, my joy and my laughter in my life would have no meaning without my tears.
Mm. Mm.
It's the tears that give value to your laugh, to your joy.
Yeah.
So that is basically, so you have to go through this grief process to be able to let go. And so while you are in the process of forgiveness, you have to go through this as well, with everything you lost. Okay? And now, as you have gone through this process, you have basically brought it to the Lord in this process. You know, it is a process that brings you closer to the Lord. And He is the one basically rebuilding you, rebuilding your life. Then you come to the fifth point, the final point, that you can now forgive totally. You can give total, complete forgiveness with all your heart. You know, in the first step, your heart was fighting against it. You did it just with your will, but your emotions were not agreeing. Your soul was not agreeing. But now, at the fifth point, with all of your heart, you have let go, so the pain of the memory is gone. And you can say, I release this person, it's fine. The Lord has taken care of my life. I no longer hold this person accountable for anything. Okay? And instead of the pain, the Lord will give you joy and peace again. And in this process, I hope you also understand how important it is when you think back of the early childhood development stages. You know that a baby from early childhood has learned to go from negative emotions back to joy and peace.
Yeah.
Because if you don't know how to do that, this is a very, very hard process, almost impossible. Okay? And so at this stage, you will remember what happened, and you need to remember because you need to learn from it. But the pain is taken out of the memory. But instead of the pain, there is peace. Okay? Now, as you go through this process, don't think if it is a bigger issue that you only need to go through it once. You know, the church I grew up in is a very legalistic church. And the town I grew up in was very traumatized in the Second World War. Almost all the men from my hometown were taken by the Germans to concentration camps in Germany. And when 1 year later the war was over, actually most of the men had been killed or died in the concentration camps in Germany. Only a few men came back. So that had a very deep impact on my hometown. And so that had a big impact on the church in my hometown. So the church in my hometown was very legalistic, because that is what undealt trauma, unforgiveness leads to legalism in the church. So in the church, they always would share the gospel, and then in the last part of every sermon, the pastor would just take back the gospel and say, but it's only for a few people. That was also because they also believed in the predestination theory. And so I was very hurt by that. I was hurt by the church being very distant. There was no personal care. The message was never included for everyone. It was only for select people, and you never could know if you were part of it or not. And let me tell you, with the struggles I had in my life, I already concluded at a young age that for sure Jesus' love was surely not for me. Because my father also had post-traumatic stress disorder, also because of the Second World War, even though for him it happened in a different place near the coast. But so it piled on top of one another. And so by the time I had my encounter with the Lord, I realized how much the Lord loved me, and I left that church and I went to a different church. And I was different, also living in a different place, in a different city. I had moved to Amsterdam. I started forgiving the church that I grew up in. So that was when I learned this very process. That is the first intentional forgiveness I started doing. I said, okay, it's time for me to forgive the church, because I want one day to be able to speak, to that same youth, not the same group of my age, but I mean in that same church, every next generation of youths, it grow up the same way. And I had the desire to minister to them and share the gospel with them in a younger age so that they will hear the gospel properly. But you cannot do that when you're angry with the church. They won't even give you an opportunity. So I started going through this process and I felt good. It felt like, yes, the pain was gone. And then a month later, I felt all the pain again. And I was like, what's wrong? Well, thank God, the teacher had already told us. He said, yes, you can never forgive more than the level of pain that you can handle at a certain time. So me allowing myself to feel the pain was just, well, if you compare it with an onion, it was just the outer layer of the pain. It had been going on, and because of so many things over the years that had been attached to it, and so many consequences of it in my life, it had become such a complicated, messy thing, is that I only could remove one layer. And then a month later, I just started feeling the next layer, which felt exactly like the first layer, as if nothing had changed. So I went through the process again, and I felt good for 3 months. And I felt the pain again. And it continued like that for 2 years. For 2 years, over and over, in a deeper level and in other slightly different aspects, I had to forgive that church and start forgiving particular people in the church and all the different kind of things they had done against me in the church. It was a wrestling of 2 years. But then finally, all the pain was gone. The onion had disappeared, and that never came back. Okay? Now, the great thing is, after that had finished, my uncle, who is also in that church, even though he's in a different town, a completely different place, he was among the elders, and they normally have like in winter, they have the youth comes together for catechism class in that church every week in groups, and then with all the youths, all the ages of the youths together, they most times have a closing program where most times they try to have somebody come to speak about missions or something like that. But of course, it's always hard to catch a missionary in the Netherlands. But by the time they had that meeting, I happened that year to be in the Netherlands. So my uncle, knowing that I was in the Netherlands that year, and actually it was another elder in the church that knew that knew me as well. Now they suggested, well, we know a missionary that will be around that time. So they asked me to speak for the youth, which was for me a great blessing. That's what I always had desired to do. And when I was asked to speak, I was there about half an hour before, and some of the elders came to me and they said, yeah, sir, we hope that it won't be disturbing to you when some of the youths might be making some noise and be talking while you are speaking, because some of our youths here actually are forced by their parents to come, but they don't really want to come and they have a hard time to listen. I told him, I said, well, I have no problem with that. I'm used to that. It doesn't bother me. But of course, I prayed that they would all listen. Now, when the elder did his introduced me and shared a little bit how the evening was going to be, lots of the noises came from the room. You know, there were maybe like 60, 70 youths, and there was a lot of noise coming. They were not quiet. The moment I started speaking, and what I spoke about was the reality of Jesus Christ on earth today. In what I've seen of the reality of what you read in scripture to see the reality in life today. And I used examples from my mission work in Nigeria, because I was in Nigeria at that time. And so, as I shared and I showed pictures and I shared the stories of the reality of the gospel in everyday's life, in the experience I have in mission, you could hear a pin drop. It was completely quiet. Not one of them was talking. Not one of them was making any noise. Then after 45 minutes, I gave them a break. I had not been able to finish everything. And then during the break, they could ask questions, and then they would have another half an hour. I would have to answer the questions. Now, most of them asked very genuine questions. Some even asked some questions that they were just trying to trigger me to see, you know. For example, so one of the questions was something about sex before marriage. And so obviously was a kind of question they thought he never will dare to answer that one. Because it's a question they don't like to answer in that church, I think, often. So I stunned them. I answered all the questions. And again, for that half an hour, you could hear a pin drop. It was completely quiet. And so even that one question that they asked me just to see if they could trigger me, you know, I answered the question. And I pray that the Lord has helped them to understand, you know, God's standards at a different level, not just at the legalism level. And so it was, for me, that was very healing, you know, to be able to reach out to a youth that was in the same kind of situation that I grew up in. And of course, I pray every day that I get those opportunities. Okay? But in order to be able to reach out to others, you must have been able to forgive. Okay? And then, of course, we have the +1 step, which I already shared with you about, you know, if possible, and the other person in the issue is also willing to forgive and acknowledge wrong, and is willing to receive and accept the forgiveness, then you can reconcile and restore the relationship. Now, also that reconciliation and restoration of the relationship, like, for example, in my example I gave with Haber, that was a very quick thing. Even though, of course, well, Haber never asked me to borrow a bicycle anymore. But I don't know if I would have said yes again. But, you know, sometimes if trust is broken in a deeper level, in a deeper way, that restoration of the relationship might take some time as well. Okay? Trust takes a lot of time to build and is broken very quick. Okay? So it sometimes takes time, and of course, in that process, the more clear the other person is convicted of his own wrong and repents of it, and says, I'm so sorry, you know, then it's much easier to more quickly build back the relationship. But the ultimate point is that if you have gone through this process in a proper way and you work properly on the restoration of the relationship will be stronger afterwards. Okay? So anyone who already has the attitude like, yeah, well, why would I even try to restore the relationship? You know, it will never be as good as before anyways anymore. So I'm not even going to try. Is actually somebody who already has given victory to the devil from the beginning. Okay. The truth is that if you go properly through that process, your relationship will be stronger and better in the end. Okay, no matter how painful the process might be. Okay. So, oh yeah, wait. I would like you to listen to this video. Okay. This is a prophetic word that the Lord gave to someone. I forgot the name at the moment, but this is based on 1 John 2, verse 2. Okay. About the forgiveness that Jesus gave. As in 1 John 2, verse 2, John says, he is the atoning sacrifice for our sin. Our is the church. And not for ours only, but also for the sins of the whole world. You know, when I said reconciliation is the problem when we do not accept the forgiveness that is prepared for us. So just listen to this. Oh, wait, I need to quickly share my sound as well. Oh, wait, sorry.
And he himself is the propitiation for our sins, and not for ours only, but for those of the whole world.
Can you hear it?
Yes, I can.
Then he said to Thomas, reach here your finger and see my hands, and reach here your hand and put it into my side, and be not faithless, but believing. And what the Lord showed me was a vision of the power of the blood of Christ. And he began to speak to my heart of how powerful is the blood of Christ. It is powerful not only for the sins of the church, but for the sins of the whole world, for all time, for every last single created human being, for all time. That is how powerful is the blood of Christ. And the Lord said to me, he says, my church does not believe in the power of the blood of Christ. And he says, when they see them come up by ones and twos and be converted, then they say, oh, because I have seen that, I believe in that. But when they watch TV and when they read the newspaper, they look upon society with despair and disgust, and they do not see it through the eyes of the power of the blood of Jesus Christ. They do not rise up from reading the newspaper and say, the blood of Christ can heal that. The blood of Christ can redeem that. The blood of Christ can save that derelict. They do not get up from the TV and say, I will go now because I believe in the power of the blood of Christ to redeem all mankind, even the homosexual, even the alcoholics, even the prostitutes, even the abused. But they read the newspapers and they are filled with despair, and they say, oh, woe is our nation. Look what has happened to us. And the Lord says that he is looking for a people, and he has come to his church. And he has come to visit his church in much the same way that he went to visit his people Israel. He went to his own. He went to his own. He went to his own first. Why? So that he could commission them to go to the Gentiles. And he has come to his church. He has come to his church. Why? So that he can commission them to go to the world. And I believe that the Lord is looking for a people who will rise up and say, I will go into the darkest part of society. I will go to the prisons. I will go to the streets. I will go out into the world. And I will go and I will say, the blood even the deepest, darkest, secret sin of all mankind. And God says that his arm is not short that it cannot save. His arm is not short that it cannot save. And his arm is not short that it cannot save England. His arm is not short that it cannot save Canada. His arm is not short that it cannot save Europe. His arm is not short that it cannot save Iran. His arm is not short that it cannot save Thailand. There is nothing, there is no one too far from the blood of Christ that it cannot be redeemed. But he says, I come to my own, and they go nowhere. And I feel like if the Lord is saying one thing, he is saying this, that if the arm of God has touched you, hold it out and touch someone else. Even if only one. Even if only one.
Okay. You know, that's the level of the forgiveness of Christ. You know, the level of his desire to reconcile with us. And so, yeah, I hope that will help you to give you a deeper understanding.